So this next situation for me is I'm glad I get to talk about it because I found it is. So I'll tell you what it is. First of all, when the tempo speeds up, there are two initial reactions that most people have. I certainly have them, and I try to find ways, excuse me, to avoid reacting right away. So when the tempo speeds up, the first thing either you want to do is play a whole lot faster, or play a whole lot slower, and let the tempo do the work for you. And my thing is, when a pattern, a drum beat, or when a rhythmic situation arises that has more energy, I want to approach that the exact same way that I approach something that's mellower and slower, or something that's easier to play along with. Just because it may be a little more challenging with respect to the tempo and the technique required, doesn't mean that the situation warrants less musicality. So the challenge then is, how do I concentrate and focus on the colors and the timbre and the rhythmic sophistication, the syncopations, and all these cue points to create something that's just as complementary to this rhythm as something that would be something a little easier to play with. And so what's interesting about this particular rhythmic situation is there's no bass drum in the pattern, so that gives me some space. And I'll use that because one thing I learned from the great Joe Pass, like when I got to hang out with Joe some, and one of the things, if you're familiar with his solo style, his unaccompanied style of guitar playing, when you listen to him play, sure, some of the rubato and unaccompanied slow ballads, it's gorgeous, but the real marvel is when he plays something in time, and you hear the bass line and the chords and a melody or a solo, improvised line, all happening at the same time. And he's only got four fingers. It's not like he's playing like Stanley Jordan with all, two hands on the neck. So I remember asking him, how he approached that and how he developed. And he said, well, the first thing is you have to realize that all three things, while there are some moments when all three things happen at the same time, the real trick is there's always something in motion, always one component in motion, either a bass line or a 2 or 3 note harmony, or a lead line, or some combination of one of the two. But there's when he's playing in time, some component, one of those three components is always in motion, keeping the time, and that creates the feeling that all three things are always happening because the time never wavers. So I'm going to employ that concept here just slightly differently with respect to having space because there's no bass drum. So it'll sound something like this, right? I'm gonna, and you'll notice that I in this case, I emphasize a little bit more that first downbeat, because that's what I'm hearing. So because there's no bass drum, now I've got space, and it sounds like I'm actually playing more. If the bass drum was happening, all you'd hear was. So now as the beat comes in and I play along with it, you can kind of see how I apply it. So let's try that. Let's hear the beat together. And so you notice there, so the beat doesn't vary much. So because of that, I don't want to have a really long, I don't want the progression to take a long time to resolve. Because then, the longer and more involved the progression is, the more monotonous the beat starts to sound. Because I'm not getting the most out of the rhythm. I'm exposing the fact that the beat, by doing that, I would be exposing the fact that the beat doesn't vary. So this progression, short, sweet, to the point. because it starts on the 4 chord, because I'm thinking in the key of E flat. So because I'm starting on the 4 minor, this A flat minor 7, and then working my way down in whole steps. I love half step and whole step motion. The concept of voice leading, I understand from my ear, my perspective of my ear, I understand why it's such a wonderfully successful concept, because it's just logical. It makes it just, you feel the motion. It's either downhill or uphill. And it makes for a very smooth flow between changes. So here I am, A flat minor, G flat major 7, E major 7. Now remember, I'm going back to E flat eventually. So by jumping down to the 5 chord to B flat 7, whenever I'm ready, I can go here to my 1, to E flat major. But if I never go there, your ear is the person, the anticipation is set. You're expecting it. So it sounds something like this. And right, and then whenever I'm ready, I can bring in another section and go to that E flat or some other resolution point, and at no point will it sound like it came out of left field. Sometimes left field is great, but in this instance, I think it's really important to be able to just do what the ear expects. Like before I get all slick and and too hip for myself, and try to come out of nowhere with a new thing, I would first like to master the art of doing exactly what my ear, and hopefully the ears of the people listening are expecting, because that's a beautiful thing, right? To be able to just play some good sounding music. And I have all this freedom in the beginning of each beat, or in the beginning of each bar, to play a little bit with a few extra rhythmic things from the right hand. Maybe instead of just going straight from, I can do that little chromatic above and below approach thing that I like to do so much, like this. And you'll notice when I do things like that, I don't do them every time. Because first of all, for me, it just sort of makes logical sense that if you want to make an exciting alteration, it's only exciting in an alteration if it happens every once in a while, if it catches your attention. After a while, you begin to dilute the effect of the original progression, which in this case I happen to like a lot. I feel like these kinds of things, a short 2-bar or 4-bar introduction over something over a beat or a groove that's moving along this fast, it accomplishes all of my goals. I pay respect to the beat by coloring, trying to color the motion. I only get in the cracks, so I take advantage of the hole left by the missing bass drum. Not the missing bass drum, but the fact that the beat doesn't have a bass drum. And so I play a little more bass, I give it a little motion, and whenever the beat wants to change, or whenever the song suggests there's a new resolution or a resolution point, I've allowed at the end of my little progression, I've got a setup chord to go wherever we want to go. And then I feel like that allows me to, if we're just going to keep what I've got here, I feel like that allows me to construct a melody or some kind of a cool little vamp, melodic vamp, and even play solo, take some improvisational approaches. Because the thing is, these kinds of progressions can be heard. When I say heard, I mean, I often refer to my inner ear, the imagination's ear, and I think that's the place in my mind where I conceive of music. Right? You hear something in your head, and then you try to find that sound. So however you think about that. For me, when I say I hear something in my head, what I mean is in my imagination I have a mechanism for hearing things, and so I could hear this as A flat minor. So that's kind of in the key of B major, right? I might hear it in the key of E major. And why that's important when I talk about the keys is because it allows me to employ different scales and different resolution points to make for cool variations. Should I be able to face the challenge of taking a solo over those chords, because they're moving kind of fast. So I don't want to just play. I want to be able to play more smoother. And so thinking about the progression, finding a common key center allows me to play short and long. I can play short and address each chord, or substitute chords, or play longer phrases that have to do with the key center that's something relevant for the sound of all four chords. So that's my very long explanation for how I deal with a short situation.